So we will begin the way we always do with a short meditation, short guided meditation. So if you're new to meditation, this will be really quick. And as a reminder to all of us, there's a myth that meditation means that we suddenly bliss out and become relaxed. And that's not always true at all. Sometimes the mind races as you try to quiet, and that's normal and okay. For this, it's just a couple of minutes, and all you need to do is listen to my voice. So, with that introduction, please close your eyes and relax in your seat. And take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And if thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them go. Like watching a car move past on the highway. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. And Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. And Shema, we're listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. We are going to actually do a little bit of a bonus meditation. And this is based on what we talked about, what I talked about in the email today. It's this idea of ratzon or will, and trying to identify what it is you were really longing for in the world. And sometimes those are things that are within our control. Sometimes they are outside of our control. And so I invite you once again just to close your eyes for a moment while you're feeling open. Think about, where are you feeling a yearning, a longing? Maybe it's for a greater spiritual connection. Maybe it's in a relationship. Maybe it has something to do with the planet. Or maybe it has something to do with your body. Allow the heart to open to see what answer you get. And when you're ready, you may once again open your eyes. Maybe you want to write down or jot down a note about something that occurred to you. And I'll open things up if anyone would like to share, like something that occurred to them that they're really yearning for. And maybe if you have an insight about how you might go about achieving that in 5783. Yes, Marianne.
I'd like to have peace, everybody to live in peace and loving each other and supporting each other. I know that's pie in the sky, but I think we'd all be a lot happier.
Yeah, and if that's kind of where the heart speaks, that's wonderful. And there may be ways you can think about having more peace and more love in your own life. Joanne. Joanne, if you could remember to unmute, please.
First, I was thinking about connecting to people and people reaching out to me, because I think I'm doing a lot more connecting. And, but, you know, people are reaching out to me because they heard my diagnosis, but they're not. So what can I get you and what can I buy you to eat and this and that? But that's not really what I want. I want, you know, an invitation, basically. And of course, I want my health. And I don't know if I discussed this last time, but I don't remember if it was before, and it probably was after I found out that I had a remarkable improvement in my health. And I can't assign it to one particular thing, but a lot of things that I did, and my attitude, and gazillion people praying for me. And I want that to continue, of course. But I really want people to connect with me because they want to see me, you know, and maybe do something for me. And part of that I can help move along, and part of it is up to the other people to do their part. That's it.
Well, thank you, Joanne, and thank you for asking us to pray for you. And I did include you in my Misha Berach. So I'm so glad to hear that things have been improving. Anyone else care to share anything? Well, that's okay. This is a little bit more private than some of the opening topics, and we have a lot to cover today as we explore can other people, Carrie said she can't hear me. Can other people hear me? Yes, so Carrie, it seems like it might be something on your end. Okay, so let's delve into the soul trait of truth a little bit. And this is, you know, like all things, it can be challenging sometimes. And I'm gonna skip that for now. And we're just gonna start with a basic midrash. Can I have someone unmute, please, and read this midrash?
Falsehood has no legs.
Yes, falsehood has no legs. And part of this has to do with Hebrew. It's almost a Hebrew pun. The Hebrew word for truth is emet, aleph, mem, taf. And aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and mem is the middle letter, and taf is the last letter. And falsehood is sheker, which is shin, kuf, resh. And those three letters are all right next to each other. So, how might that relate to this idea of falsehood not having any legs? Yes, Christo, and then Joanne.
Could it be that with truth being the first, middle, and last letters of the whole language, is that truth is looking at all the available information and taking it all into consideration and not leaving something out? Whereas Sheker is looking at only what's close at hand, but ignoring all the rest.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's great. You have this big spread out truth and falsehood is all close together. Joanne, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
I guess it was similar, but like the truth has a large base to support it.
Mhm.
The falsehood is like standing on one leg, maybe. I don't know what the gematria, if he mentions that also, might also be interesting to know.
I don't. Gematria is a system of each Hebrew letter has a number associated with it. And so you might add up for a word and see what the number is, and then see, well, what other words have those same numbers? Like Chai, Het Yud adds up to 18, and Chai means life. So that's why often like people will give bar mitzvah gifts in multiples of 18 because it's sort of it relates to the gematria of 18 in life. Karen.
So there's an expression, the truth shall let us free. And truths don't require falsehoods to keep the story going. Truths don't require a lot of work. And they engender trust, I would think, and honesty. But falsehoods with no legs, to me, is that they stay with you. They stick. They're hard to get rid of. And in order to get rid of falsehoods, sometimes damage happens. And so that's my visual for truth that lets our souls soar, and falsehoods that keep us closed off and afraid that someone else may find out and the damage that can result.
Yeah, there's so many like books and movies where someone's, spinning a web of lies and living a double life, and it's more and more work and all this looking over my shoulder, and is anybody going to find out? And that is exhausting. And whereas the truth might be hard to share at some situations, but it doesn't have that kind of anxiety associated with it. I think it's interesting that both you and Christo brought up, Christo had said truth has multiple perspectives to it. And I think that's really a key element towards understanding what this is about. So I'm going to share the next slide. Let's see, we'll go back to the slideshow. So there's emet, that's what we just talked about, the Hebrew word. And there's a saying that only God sits on the throne of truth. And may I ask someone to sort of understand what this is about? Could someone please read this second and third bullet?
Humans have limited perceptions and faulty memory, meaning that each of us can have our own version of the truth. Truth is learning to see the truth from another's perspective. As it says, execute the judgment of truth. Zechariah 8:16. Or Zechariah, if you want to anglicize it.
Great, thank you. I'm going to stop the share, and I'm also going to copy this to the chat. So do you agree with that? That each of us has our own version of the truth? How may that be correct or not correct.
Hmm.
Karen, is your hand still up from before, or is that new?
No.
Okay, so let's hear from Paul and then Joanne.
So I think it's something I guess I was taught some by my mother when I was a kid, and as I grew up, I continued to observe this. And I tend to see things from multiple perspectives myself, and that meant that when I was talking with somebody, it often was not difficult for me to see it from their perspective, whatever they were looking at it. And over time, that's really, it's been difficult because sometimes I don't want to see it from the other person's perspective, you know, when political things are happening. But honestly, I think the only way of understanding my world, understanding my peers, is really to just know that they're looking at the same thing, but from a different perspective.
Thank you, Paul. So yeah, so there is a sense in your experience where different people can be looking at the same thing, but their perspectives are very different. And in a sense, that means that there can be more than one truth because of the different perspectives that people are bringing. Joanne, what are your thoughts?
Well, I disagree. I think that truth should be objective. And there's one truth, no matter what perspective. You know, you may have an opinion or you may have a lie that you're pushing, but that's not true. So you can have your own opinion, but you can't have your own truth. That's what I think. Thank you.
Yeah, and so Joanne is also bringing up a good point. Hey, sometimes things are objectively out there. So it is or it isn't kind of what's going on with that. Bonnie.
So sorry, Joanne, I disagree with you on the piece of an eyewitness. If you've seen an accident, 3 people have 3 different views of what happened. I agree with you for the most part, but I think there are a number of circumstances where, and an accident to me is one of them, where everybody saw it differently. And so who's right and who's wrong in that case is often difficult. The other piece is, and I'm not sure it fits into this, but if you tell yourself a lie and you tell yourself or enough times, you then believe it. And I don't know where that fits in, but it's something that bothers me.
Yeah, this could get real complicated real fast. So we have Frank and then Martin, and then I see Harry raising his hand.
I liked what Paul said, and that is, you know, when we have regard for each other, then we can see it in other person's perspective, whether it's a car accident or anything else in life. And so I think that the truth is not that truth is slippery. It's more like the perspective we have. And when we say that truth is objective, fall into a trap. Because what your objective is might be different than somebody else's. So I think, again, it's important to be able to listen to one another so that we can learn more about what we're trying to arrive at.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Martin, and then Harry.
Yeah, when there's a comment about one truth, is that God's truth?
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of that first bullet we looked at, that God sits on the throne of truth, and I think that could be amended as only God sits on the throne of truth.
Okay, so
So
that
yeah,
would,
God can understand the car accident from all perspectives simultaneously.
Yeah.
But for
So I think-
humans,
Mhm.
we get what we get. We get what's limited by our perceptions, which are influenced by our experience, and we're going to see it differently.
So if the one truth is God's truth, then I guess it depends on which God one believes in. Right?
Well, that's a whole other issue. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other comment about lies getting repeated, it becomes an assumed truth. Well, that certainly has happened in Germany, and it's certainly happening in the US right now on the national level. So I agree. Repeated lies become a truth for some people. Very dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't want to get into particular, which things are lies and which are true, because within this group, people may disagree about which is which, and we're not here to
Yeah.
litigate that.
Yeah.
But it is part of the spiritual challenge that our country is facing, that people strongly disagree about what's true and what isn't true.
True.
And we're losing our ability to sort of connect with people who we disagree with on the political issues.
Yeah.
So let's see. Harry, you've been very patient. So if you could unmute, please.
As
There
I
you
listen
go.
to all this discussion about truth, I think to sum it up, is we have personal truth or beliefs that we believe are true, and they're beliefs. And if you have enough people that believe it, is it true? But I think, as we all agree, that there are groups of people that believe it, and there are groups of people that won't believe it. So I think we're all talking about personal truth, that it belongs to you and your group, and I think that's pretty much, and that's why we have all these discussions, and that's why we have juries, and that's why we have all these processes to establish what we all agree to as the truth. So when a verdict comes out, that's the jury's version of the truth. And I think that's the way it works, that there is no guarantee of a true truth. It's our society that comes up with the truth. We have our personal
Even
truth,
juries sometimes get it wrong, of course.
but it's their truth. That's true.
Yeah.
So I guess we can't nail down truth, is the bottom line.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the car accident example. Let's say there's 4 witnesses and 3 people give 3 different accounts of what happened, and the 4th person says there was no car accident.
It's all
Right?
imagination.
So one is a falsehood, and then there are 3 different truths. And so, I think in some ways it might be easier to detect falsehoods, but that is, it's who do you believe? If someone really trusts the person who said there was no accident, then they might be believed. So but again, in the spiritual realm, the divine, if you believe in that, or the universe, has access to all the information. So Joanne and then Karen.
Okay, just one sec. So I'm sorry.
Should we come back to you, or are you?
Wait, I think I'm here. I don't know. I'm trying to close the chat. What I wanted to say is that nowadays, with cell phone videos of what happened, we get more objectivity. You can't say, I didn't do something when it's on a lot of it. It was videotaped, and we see it. we see what you did. Okay. So that adds more truth and less lying and maybe misperceptions. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Yeah, no, the impact of being able to have videos and recordings is on society has been huge. And so Karen.
I hear that there are so many different ways to perceive truth as scientific fact or opinion, and different ways to suss out the truth as close as a consensus can happen, and that verifiable truths at one point in time may become debunked in the future. But my question is, the search for truth often seems so divisive. How can we get close and then figure out how to move from there without being torn apart?
Yeah, we're going to, I think that brings up a really important point about, how painful truth can be. When someone's taunting you on the playground when you're a kid, what they're saying may be true, which can be incredibly painful. You're so short, or whatever. So there's truth isn't our only thing that's in play. Alan, you put something in the chat, which I thought was really an important point. Is that something you'd like to speak to, or would you just prefer people to look at the chat?
I guess look at the chat first.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of in the debates about Hillel and Shammai when it comes to the truth. Martin, we're from Martin and Joanne, and then I want to bring up the spectrum of truth.
Yeah, to Harry's point about personal truths, and then Karen's comment about consensus. So if there is a consensus about what's the truth, that might be perhaps that's only a convenient truth, because it lets then decisions be made on the convenience of the truth. Think of Al Gore's book, The Inconvenient Truth. So sometimes maybe a truth that's where there's a consensus, yeah, this is the truth. Perhaps that's just a convenience so that we can move ahead. That's just my thought on those words. Yeah, no, we were talking about that in my bereavement, and part of my bereavement education, my internship, where it's it's a convenient convention to say to someone, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine. Is that true? Often not. But do we want to get into it? Not necessarily. Probably not. And sometimes that's appropriate, and sometimes it really can leave us feeling very cut off and alienated. So Joanne, if you can remember to unmute, please.
So the only other thing I wanted to say is something I've read, and I guess that in order to come to some kind of understanding of each other, we need to talk to each other. And maybe not enough of that is going on in the world and in our country. And I'm just going to mention this. So I read that, my party, okay, I won't mention it, but doesn't reach out to rural people who might even agree with them on a lot of things. So they don't even know what these people believe. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Rabbi Ira Stone, the great Mussar teacher, he reminds us that the purpose of Mussar is to bear the burden of the other. The whole point of doing this spiritual work is so we can be in relationship with other people. The reason why we wrestle with truth is because it so often enhances or interferes with relationships. And so I think you're spot on, Joanne. that's the big picture here. The big picture isn't, what really happened at the car accident. The big picture is, how does this impact our relationships? And the legal system can hash out like what really happened at the car accident. That's not like the Mussar task. Frank.
Yes, today I traveled with my brother and his family, and that included my niece Abigail, and we just talked just a little earlier, and she was saying that some things, when she talks with her kids, sometimes she says that they're around 14 and 12, like about the idea of white truth or white lie or whatever. And what I remind myself is that sounds like a negative. And what I've learned is that our teachers have taught us that if the truth can hurt somebody, it's better to keep it to yourself. And when I learned this some years ago, I realized I was embarrassed to myself all the times when I use truths in not a nice way. And I can give an example to a friend down the street from here. We were walking one time, and she's observant. I am observant in my own way. And I think in our conversation, I said, well, I just don't believe in God. And it was really the wrong thing to say. And she let me know. She let me have it. And I deserved it. It was embarrassing. So truth is something that you will listen. I think we need to listen more. And I think a couple of people have said that, including Joanne. We need to listen more, because by listening, truth becomes a little bit more accessible.
Beautiful. Thank you, Frank. Well, that is a great segue to looking at both the mantra and the spectrum of truth. And so, what Frank was talking about is too much truth can be incredibly hurtful. And sometimes it's unintended. Like, I told a friend of mine when I was in Europe that the Hebrew alphabet actually was originally the Aramaic alphabet. He thought the Aramaic alphabet borrowed the Hebrew alphabet, not vice versa. And this really upset him. This is like archaeological truth, the scientific truth, but he had heard all these tales about how God had created the Hebrew letters and they were so beautiful and they had all this deep meaning. And so he really had a hard time reconciling that. And I was just, talking about, something I'd learned in the Talmud class. And this was a side note. But then if we have too little truth, and maybe it was Karen and someone else, I can't remember who said it, about eroding trust. If we really don't tell the truth, then we're not trustworthy. But so we can talk about that. And I also want to talk about this idea of being distant from falsehood. Why is that our mantra, which comes right out of Exodus, which says, distance yourself from a false matter. So given our conversation, why is it that our mantra is about falsehood and not about the truth? Why doesn't it say stay close to the truth as opposed to be distant from falsehood? Bonnie, I saw you unmuting. Does that mean you have something you'd like to share, or is that just inadvertent?
I think it could be easy to fall into something like a lie. And so you keep yourself at a distance. I don't need to be part of that. And I don't remember who, I think it was Harry who said basically what my mother used to say, which is, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. And for those of us who have a hard time with air that's not filled, that's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. Absolutely. Thank you, Bonnie. Susan.
Yeah, I think that the truth has some comes from all these different perspectives depending on where you stand. And it's much easier to know what's false and what's true. That's where I
Yeah.
would look at it, the way I look at it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and that makes a lot of sense. It's like there was no car accident. Well, here's the camera
There's-
footage
Yeah,
of
lots
the
of
wreck.
evidence here.
Yeah. Whereas, yeah, so that's definitely one element of it. Sometimes it's easier to tell the falsehoods. Harry and then Martin. Harry, if you could unmute, please. Harry, you're still muted. There you go.
How about now?
Yeah, now you're unmuted.
Okay. I guess the challenge is stay away from falsehoods. If we can't determine the truth, how do we know it's false? You know, so in order to say that this is false, you have to do some research. I'll give you an example that I heard today, which is very clear to how you could fall into a falsehood. It was said that 61% of Republicans believe that this country was founded as a Christian nation. Okay, you could believe that, but if you did your homework, it's totally the opposite. Because this country was founded on no religion and the separation of religion. Although the founders believed in God, they didn't believe in Christianity as being the dominant, faith. So that's a falsehood, but you can see how people can just accept it. So I think saying don't fall into falsehood is a challenge.
Yeah, there's nothing easy about this. I've done a lot of work trying to facilitate conversations across the political divide. There's this wonderful organization called Braver Angels, and I went to a training from them, and they said, we tend to believe things that agree with stuff that we already believe.
Exactly.
So he said, if you hear something that you disagree with, check the source. And if you hear something you agree with, verify with 2 sources, because we are biased towards believing stuff we already agree with, and that's part of human psychology. And so that's a piece of this fiction.
Yeah.
Martin, and then Paul.
Yeah, Greg, you mentioned the question of why is there a focus on to distance oneself from falsehoods versus spending more energy seeking the truth? I believe that's what the question was. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So with falsehood, it's something worthy of being fearful of. So let's just make sure we are defending ourselves from going to the falsehood. I don't think we have to fear learning the truth. So that's why I think the emphasis on falsehood protections.
Great, thank you. There's more of a danger from a falsehood.
Yeah.
Wonderful idea. Paul.
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating conversation, just this piece right here about what you brought up about falsehoods, because there are many things that I have come across in my life where I thought that there's no way that can be true. That seems really, untrue. But I'm curious enough to dig into it. And the big, one shining example for me was back in the nuclear freeze back in the 80s. And I had been doing some research on some military technology, and there was one rabbit hole I went down into that I found my truth with all the sources. And then I read another article that was taking a very different answer away from the same event. And so I went down that rabbit hole, and I realized that, okay, so it's not false as much as they decided to emphasize certain things more than others in terms of how they put their story together about what this event really meant. Whereas I was focusing on other elements in that story, and I came away with a different story. And so I think stories are what we tell ourselves to help reinforce what we think is true or what we think is false. But it's sort of following how somebody else got to that story is really, I think it really, having had that example pretty early in my adult life, it's always been something I go back to remind myself that there's a story that somebody's been told, and for them, they're looking at the same set of events. Like Harry said, you know, that, or no, it was Martin, about being a Christian nation, but maybe it was Harry. I can't remember anymore. But one of those is true, one of those is false. I'll just have to go back to the recording to figure that out. But you know, there are people that have been told the story, and it is something that they feel comfortable with. So going back and showing them something that tells a different story can be a challenge, because it does challenge their sense of what their world is like, for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really insightful. It's all about, you know, the stories that we tell ourselves, and that's making me think that maybe it doesn't say cling to the truth, because if I'm just clinging to my own truth, I'm not going to be listening to anybody else. And there may not be anything false about my truth, but it may not be complete, you know, or maybe only true in a certain circumstance. It's like, you know, what's the best way to end the Ukraine war? There's no truth to that. Nobody knows. You know, we could have arguments and debates, but if I just cling to it, has to be the only way to handle it is this way, you know, especially for a complicated situation, there's not a way to get at the truth. Okay, well, we have gone a little longer than usual before our breakout rooms, but since we won't be meeting next week, I do want to make sure we get to them. So this is a passage, and I think we may have looked at this if you were here a year or so ago. It's from Marilyn Saltzman's book, Your Love is Blasting My Heart, which is a grandmother's perspective on a Mussar journey. It's a really nice little book. And she's saying, instead of saying, I told you a million times I don't like hot dogs, I would say I had a bad experience with hot dogs as a kid and I still don't eat them. And that distinction sort of helped her. She said it's helps keep her on the truth side as opposed to kind of going down the slippery slope of lying. And so there's a number of different ways, and Judaism has lots of books about different ways that we fall away from the truth. But some of them are, you know, we're challenged seeing another's perspective, maybe embellishing stories, making ourselves look better, being too harsh. You know, I was New Yorker, man. You couldn't handle the truth. That meant something was wrong with you. So I'm going to put us to breakout groups, and I will put this bottom part and maybe just talk a little bit about where you find yourself challenged by the truth. Okay, so there's that. I'm going to stop sharing. And then, so if you're new here today, or to remind all of us, you're going to see something on the screen which says join breakout room. And in the breakout room, there's no cameras, everything is confidential, and it's just a chance to kind of speak to one or two other people, you know, maybe at a little bit of a deeper level. So please click accept breakout room, and then I'll see you in a few minutes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. So we have about 5 minutes left, and there is time to share, but we'll need to go speed round a little bit. So we have Karen and then Bonnie.
So I realized in chat that one of my frustrations with sussing out the truth is that I often feel like that is an exercise that people do to avoid blame for themselves, to find out who it is that's at fault and who we can hold accountable. And that started our conversation.
Got it. Yeah. There's a whole element of blame that comes in here. And the reality is complicated problems have multiple contributors to them. But, you know, yeah, you said it well. I won't repeat it since we're on speed round. So Bonnie.
So I do these breakout sessions for teens during the high holidays, and I brought one back that I'm going to do Monday, first day of Rosh Hashanah, called Dealing with Difficult Situations. And one of them is the sentence, "You may be right." And it ends every argument, because even though you're sure that person is 99.9% wrong, there's that little piece in there, and it ends an argument. And the other piece that I've shared before is making sure I really am aware of the word think. Is it thoughtful, honest, intelligent, necessary, and kind before the mouth opens? So those, I hope the teen, and there are 25 others, but I hope the teens find those helpful. I hope any of you find them helpful. Thanks.
Those are great. And
Shana.
Shanatava, I always like to one of the jokes is that, you know, I could be wrong. There was one other time I was wrong, you know, so that's, you know, but I think your way's a little better. Anyone else care to share from their experience? Harry, if you could remember to unmute, please.
Okay, I just want to pick up on what Bonnie said. And there's a shortcut to what she said. Instead of saying no, but say yes, but. That way, it's getting to the same point, but it's easier to remember. At least
I
for
think
me.
there's another version which is even better, the improv version, which is yes and.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Joanne.
I just wanted to ask Bonnie to repeat that. Think, thoughtful, helpful.
There are two. One is think. Is it thoughtful, honest, intelligent, necessary, and kind?
Okay.
And the other is wait. Why am I talking?
Those are good.
They
Yeah,
all come.
Thank you.
12-step program.
Very good.
Good.
You know, kindness
Thank
is supposed to be our guide for this. You know, it's not whether you say something just because it's true doesn't mean we should say it. I used to say that my two daughters used to fight all the time. And it's like, but it's true. It's like, well, it may be true, but it doesn't mean you need to say it. You know, it can stay in your head. And that usually was not well received. And, you know, listening to the parent who is really not very smart to the teen point of view. So, well, thank you all so much for this this wonderful gathering today. We'll close the way we began with once again short meditation. So please close your eyes. Taking a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. I invite you once again to open yourself up to that inner voice. What is it that you yearn for? And how might this high holiday season, if you practice them, help set you on a path towards achieving some of that in our coming year? And when you're ready, you may open your eyes.